was supposed to be some kind of a greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base.
Problem is, that's not what happened. And we should know, CBS News accompanied the First Lady and daughter Chelsea on that Bosnia trip. That's Senator Clinton talking to me on the military flight into Tuzla. And these are the pictures we recorded of the greeting ceremony when the plane landed. Compare that to Senator Clinton's account.
I remember landing under sniper fire. There was no greeting ceremony, and we basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
Well, that is what happened. That was very definitive. That's a very important last few words there. Joining us now is Sharyl Attkisson, Emmy Award-winning journalist, former CBS News correspondent, author of Stonewalled, My Fight for Truth Against the Forces of Obstruction, Intimidation, and Harassment in Obama's Washington. There it is on the screen with her lovely, beautiful face. Hello, Sharyl. Good to talk to you again.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let me ask you this. How does what Hillary said about Bosnia and sniper fire, which obviously wasn't true, as your excellent report indicated, how does that compare in your mind with Brian Williams' problem?
It was strangely reminiscent. In both instances, this is neither here nor there, but the deceit was exposed 12 years after the actual event. That's just a coincidence of timing. And in both cases, the attempt at a mea culpa initially kind of almost made things worse. With Hillary Clinton, after the video was shown that there was no sniper fire, there was no apparent danger on the runway, as she claimed, she doubled down and said, well, I stopped and you saw pictures of me greeting a young girl because how could I walk past her and break her little heart? But after that, I ran to the car. So I was assigned to do a second-day story by Evening News at the time that showed more video, that too wasn't true. And once she knew we had the video, it's just beyond me that she continued to tell this tale. We showed the video that she lingered on the runway, took pictures with a group of seventh graders, visited with the troops, took photographs with them. There was no apparent danger to us. There was no mention of it. There was no corkscrew landing. There was no sniper fire. So you kind of wonder in both instances, there were so many other people that knew this wasn't true, how they got away for so long with telling the story and how they thought that they would get away with it without somebody coming to them, family members and so on, saying, that didn't happen. You know, you weren't shot at, were you?
Now, let me ask you this. Does this now become, and I think the answer is yes, I mean, does this now become an issue again in the presidential race if she's the nominee or if someone runs against her? And if Brian Williams exits NBC, does that make it even more difficult for Hillary as opposed to if, you know, he stays ultimately?
Well, to me, part of the irony is if Brian Williams isn't able to survive it, that we think it's important enough when somebody gives this kind of story that he would lose his career, and yet we didn't care enough to have it matter that much with someone who became our Secretary of State, who we relied on for honest answers and truths in the aftermath of Benghazi and so on. Is it really more important that Brian Williams has a certain type of character and honesty than a presidential candidate or Secretary of State? I don't know. That's up for the American people to decide, but clearly they got past it in the case of Hillary Clinton, although it was never explained. We'll have to see if people can get past it in the case of Brian Williams.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, just playing conspiracy theorist here in my own mind. You know, NBC gave Chelsea Clinton a cushy job, $600 grand reportedly. She did maybe a couple of reports. So I would assume that the Clintons and NBC have some kind of relationship. Might the Clintons be leaning on NBC? Is this beyond the realm of possibility? Because you've been in the trenches, obviously, to not fire Brian Williams so that that scenario and those questions you just raised do not come to fruition?
Gosh, I have no idea. I mean, I think one of the bigger factors might be, and I don't know much about it, but it was described to me by some NBC people that there is a pending sale, that this could come into play in terms of the value of the company, the reputation of the company, and its marketability, more than anything else may come into play.
Interesting, very interesting. All right, let's move on and let's talk about something very near and dear, and that is Benghazi. I see where both Democrats and Republicans on the Select Committee want to hear from Hillary Clinton, but the chairman of the committee says, wait a minute, you know, we need documents from the State Department that we never got the first time around when we had the congressional hearings. So what do you think is going to happen? Will Hillary testify, and what do you think is going to happen there?
From what I'm told, she's indicated a willingness to do so. And Democrats and her camp, in some respects, would rather do it, again, I'm told, sooner rather than later to get it over with. The hard part is, obviously, the committee says it can't ask the proper questions and review all the material until they've been, with her, until they've been provided the documents they've been asking for since 2013. Hillary Clinton knows, again, from sources that I have, through her own polling and with the help of her ally group, Media Matters, the left-wing propaganda group, that this is a big issue. Even, as much as they try to put out that nobody cares and it's a scandal and a witch hunt, they've done internal polling, I'm told, that shows people do care. They do see it as a legitimate issue. They think it was a good idea to establish the committee. And I think she knows she needs to put the matter behind her as best she can. And I would, if I had to guess, I would say she probably will testify, and it may be behind closed doors in a transcribed interview rather than in public. I'm not sure which form it would take.
President Obama finally gave an interview, and he said in that magazine interview that the news media absolutely overstates the risks of terrorism because stories about things like climate change aren't sexy and don't drive ratings. This comes as his national security advisor on Friday talked at length about climate change and poo-pooed, in effect, terrorism, saying it's not the existential threat that the Cold War posed or that World War II posed. I mean, what is it about these people?
Well, I would say, I guess there is a legitimate difference of opinion as to how serious a threat terrorism is to our country today. I've heard ordinary citizens make similar arguments. They're not concerned, they're not worried, they don't think it's here. But I would say there is a large body of people, including public policy people and counterterrorism people in the know, who are concerned, and apparently they just differ with the President of the United States on this point. I tend to think, just from talking with experts, including some who work for the Obama administration, I do think there is a serious threat that has to be addressed. You know, in America, sometimes we tend to only look as far as the end of our nose and not address things down the road. And I think we need to really address things down the road before they're here and before it's too late. That's just my school of thought in general.
Very briefly, I didn't ask you this. We got 10 seconds. Does Brian Williams survive this?
Gosh, 10 seconds. It's hard to say. If Hillary Clinton could, maybe Brian Williams.
All right, good enough. Sharyl, always great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Malzberg panel's next. Don't go away.